If you live alone, you are already at risk. For a long time, I thought that this applied only to the younger ones. But danger does not come at night with a crowbar in hand. It comes during the day, with a smile, with a lunch in a container. My name is Samuel, but my friends have called me Sam since I was young. I am 74, and it's been 3 years since I woke up without the sound of her footsteps in the kitchen. Without Emma, my wife died suddenly. She just fell asleep and never woke up, quietly as she had always lived. After that, the house seemed to stand still. No smell of coffee, no noise of the washing machine, no TV, which she always forgot to turn off. Do you know what the worst thing about old age is? It's not wrinkles, pills, or medicine prices that rise faster than the borscht in the fridge. The worst thing is silence, when you can talk to yourself and it doesn't seem strange anymore. The first year, I somehow managed to hold on. I played old recordings on the cassetted player, looked through our photos, even tried to start a diary. But writing, today I was silent again. Somehow quickly got boring. I went outside to look at people, just to sit in the park. Sometimes I thought about getting a dog, but I knew I didn't have the strength anymore. And who would take care of it if something happened to me? One morning I couldn't get up. My back broke like an old umbrella. I lay on the floor for half an hour, looking at the ceiling, thinking that this was the end. But then I just cursed and reached for the phone. After that, my son said, "Dad, stop playing at being independent. I'll find you someone, a nurse." I thought that was it, my freedom was gone. But honestly, I was even glad, because I was afraid of nights, not because of ghosts, but because of the screaming silence. Sarah appeared 2 weeks later. She was young, about 35, dark hair, and a calm voice like a music teacher. She came, smiled, and immediately set to work. But she tidied up the kitchen, put away some old newspapers, and then looked at me as a human being, not a patient. "I will not bother you. I'm just here for you. In case you fall again," she said, and it was like a breath of air. A few days later, she knew how I liked my coffee a little bitter, with a drop of milk. She cleaned gently, without noise, and what was important, she was silent when I didn't want to talk. But she listened when I started talking about Emma, and she did not interrupt. And this is an expensive skill. I felt that for the first time in years, I had someone to share my thoughts with, even if they were not always happy. I remembered how I worked at a factory when I was young, how I first bought a car. She listened, laughed in the right places. And then she asked, "Do you have any relatives nearby?" And I felt something in my chest flinch. I hadn't paid attention when she first opened the box of bills. I accidentally. And again the smile. I thought she just wanted to help. She started suggesting that we order groceries online, so we don't have to carry bags. She also started a new medication diary. Everything seemed to be going well. But there was something in her eyes when she read my pension letter from the bank. Like curiosity or hunger, one evening she brought me a pie. Homemade, warm. I baked it myself. Just like your Emma used to make, with cherries. I didn't tell her that Emma had baked this kind of pie. But Sarah knew. How did she know? I didn't pay attention at the time, but I should have. When you live alone, your door opens to many people. But not everyone who comes in wants to stay a friend. Sometimes the enemy also comes in slippers and with a pie in his hands. But then I didn't know that I lost everything the day I let her into my home, when there is such a quiet magic when you are not told, "Trust me." But you have already signed up, with your heart, your wallet, and your peace of mind. I believed Sarah even before she started casting spells. The first weeks with her really became easier. It was as if I felt the rhythm again. Not the same rhythm I had with Emma, no. It was different, but also human. Sarah knew how to disappear and reappear exactly when it was needed. Her every move was deliberate. She did not ask unnecessary questions, but answered as if she had known me for many years. Even when she was silent, on topic. And I caught myself thinking that I was looking forward to her arrival more than my son's call. And my son, by the way, began to call less often. One day I woke up and heard something frying in the kitchen. It was Sarah. And she was singing to herself, and for a moment I thought, God, it's so good. But you know what the real trap is. It looks like heaven. She even got me a new wallet, an electronic one. And oh, it will be convenient for you to just tap your finger. You don't have to carry cash. At the time, I thought it was clever. The pension was transferred to the card. She offered to set up auto payments, applications, everything. She provided, as they say, a full service. I signed a couple of documents. She brought them in a plastic folder. Everything was printed in a nice font, she explained. This is just a formality for care, so that I can pick up prescriptions from the pharmacy and deal with the bureaucracy for you. And I thought it was just incredibly convenient. I've always hated Q's buttons, those stupid voice menace in banks. So I signed. No glasses. No details. I just trusted them. Because she was like the daughter I never had. One day I asked her why $150 had been taken from her card, but she calmly replied. It automatically went for health insurance. I set up the system. It worked a little bit wrong. I fixed it. I nodded. And she brought me cookies, the ones I've loved since I was a kid. Where did she get the recipe? I don't know, but it melted my anxiety like snow under my fingers. Sarah started staying overnight. At first, because I felt weak. Up to Oka then, so you don't fall again. And then she didn't explain anything. She just stayed. She made tea. I read the newspaper. Sometimes she would turn on the TV quietly. Her things appeared in the room, a charger, a blanket, a book about financial literacy. And I thought, why not? Someone needs my home, someone cares about me. Finally, my old friend George stopped by one day. We've known each other for 40 years, since the days when beer cost less than $1, and we were over 200 pounds each. He looked at Sarah and then at me and asked, "Are you sure you're okay?" And I was offended. George had always been straight as a whip. But here he hit a nerve. I said, "You're just not used to someone being kind for no reason." And he just shrugged his shoulders and said, "Okay. But you once believed that salesman who sold you a fishing trip to Mexico and then forgot to pick you up from the airport." I laughed. But deep down inside, something stung. Because I remembered that incident. And that it had all started with a smile then too. The next week, Sarah asked for the password to my laptop. "I want to pay for your medication through a new program, Medicare. It's confusing, but I'll figure it out quickly." And I told her the password. It was Emma Forever. She didn't say anything. But she entered it exactly the first time. I noticed. That night was the first time I didn't fall asleep right away. I listened to her every step in the hallway. And a thought kept running through my head. What if she knows more than I think? And you know, when you start to doubt, it's too late. Because real magic has no smoke or lights. It works quietly. Until it takes everything. They say that everyone has a second chance. And some even have a third. But no one tells you that this chance sometimes comes with the aroma of apple pie and prescribed tranquilizers at night. After Sarah started spending the night at my place regularly, the house came to life. And I began to wake up not from back pain, but from the smell of toast and coffee. She was humming something of her own, quietly, barely audible, as if music had settled in our house again. And I wanted to believe that life was not over yet, that even at 74 you can start something. Not a career, not a renovation, but feelings. One morning Sarah brought me an album with old photos. She said, "I found it in the attic, next to the TV box." There were pictures from my and Emma's youth, the first camping trip, a picnic, a trip to Niagara. And I didn't understand whether she wanted to move me or erase the line between past and present. She sat down next to me, took my hand, and she said, "You were happy. But happiness does not end with one person. It can be found again." For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to think about a woman. Not as a nurse, but as someone close, maybe even more. She was not Emma. She was different, calm, confident, somehow even wise. One evening she brought me a pie, another one, this time with apples and cinnamon. "I'm experimenting," she said. "It's a new recipe. Especially for you. Moana, you are my inspiration." And I felt warm, dangerously warm. When you get older, your body feels like glass and your heart softens. I told her that I was afraid to be alone. She did not answer. She just took my hand and put it on her shoulder. That night I almost told her that she had become more than just a nurse to me. But she beat me to it. I know. Take your time. Everything will come by itself. And I believed her. Because wanting someone is one thing. But when someone wants you at that age, it's almost a divine feeling. A week later, she said, "I thought maybe you should draw up a power of attorney. Not a full one, just a partial one, so that I can safely take your documents, medicines, and make payments. Just to make things easier." She added with a smile, "I'm like family anyway." I agreed. Again without reading. Again without glasses. I just took the pen and signed. Because I thought that this is what love looks like after 70, quiet, without pathos but real. But one morning I got a call from the bank. A woman's voice on the other end asked, "Mr. Roberts, do you really want to withdraw $2,000 in cash through a proxy?" I was shocked. I said no. But immediately after that I thought to myself, maybe she just forgot to tell me. When I asked her, she didn't bat an eye. It was for a new bed. "You said yourself that the old one was a nightmare." And indeed I did. And the bed really could not stand my snoring anymore. But 2,000. We sat down in the kitchen. I wanted to put her in her place, to ask her directly if it was okay to take that kind of money. But she looked me in the eye and said, "Sam, I don't just work here. I care about you. And I don't care what the bank or your son thinks. I'm here when others just call once a week." And then I said, "You're right." Because, damn it, she was there. And my son. My son sent me a t-shirt for Christmas that best dad. And a box of snacks without a signature. Sarah wiped my forehead when I was sick and baked me pies. But sometimes love is not a pie. It's a poison that smells like vanilla. And while you think you're in love, you've already been quietly eaten. To the last penny. To the last document. When you are over 70, everything is simplified. Set one password for everything, says the IT guy at the bank. Use your face to log in, the phone advises. But the most dangerous password is trust, because once you give it away, you can never get it back. About 2 weeks passed after the bed incident. Sarah was gentle, caring, and even went further. She installed a new smartphone for me. She showed me everything, explained everything, turned on the voice functions. She said, "Now you are a real modern grandfather." And I laughed, because it was fun. I really felt that not everything was over. Maybe it's true life is just beginning. And then she said, "Let me set a password so you don't forget. The same one for your phone, your bank account, and your email. Emma, I'll save everything in my notes." And I agreed, because it's convenient, because she's close by, because I will do everything for you. The next morning I wanted to see a letter from my lawyer. He wrote that I needed to update my will. But the password didn't work. I tried 3 times and nothing. "Sarah," I called out, "didn't you change the password?" She answered from the kitchen, No, Sam, it's the same." I laughed, "Maybe you got it wrong." I laughed, of course I could have. At my age, forgetting a digit is like leaving the house with slippers on. But something in her voice was deep, silent, as if she already knew that I would not open anything. A day later, I wanted to place an order online, groceries with delivery. But the bank's page read, "Login attempt blocked." I got nervous. I clicked Restore Access. But there it was. The code will be sent to another phone number. I hadn't set that up. When I asked Sarah, she answered quickly. I added my number just in case. In case something happens to you. It's safer that way. I noticed it would. Safer. But for some reason, a bone of anxiety stuck in my chest. She started setting reminders on my phone when to take my medication, when to call my son. But every time I tried to call her, she would suddenly appear. I've already arranged it. He's busy. You better get some rest. I'll arrange everything. My phone was no longer mine, and neither were my decisions. I was like being wrapped in a soft blanket, blindfolded. Sleep. I'll take care of you. One evening, my old friend Tom called. We hadn't talked in a year. His voice was hoarse but comforting. Sam, I heard that you don't answer your mail. Is something keeping you at home? And I lied. No, everything is fine. I've just been forgetful. But something stabbed me in the heart, as if I had betrayed myself. Because I knew for sure I am not forgetful. I am a prisoner in a new smartphone where the password no longer belongs to me. Sarah suggested that I switch all my bills to auto-pay. So you don't miss anything. And I signed again on the screen with one touch, without glasses. No questions asked, because you trust her. She started making a shopping list. She said. Why do you need to worry about cards or receipts? You deserve peace of mind. I agreed again, because it was true. I really wanted peace. But think that peace was when you can't even buy your own toothpaste without permission. Once, when I was alone, I sat in front of the bathroom mirror. I asked myself, Sam, when did you become a puppet? You were always strong. You used to make your own decisions. And now you can't even read a letter without her consent. And then I cried. Not from pain. It was powerlessness. But the worst thing is when you realize that you don't know where love ends. And manipulation begins. Because when you entrust someone with the password to your soul, can you change it later? In old age, we are not afraid of pain. The pain is familiar. We are afraid of the morning when something will change forever. Or someone will be gone. Or we will be replaced by someone else's password, receipt. We are afraid that tomorrow may not come. And if it does come, it will not be ours. I woke up early, when the sun was just tickling the windows, and the smell of hot bread hung in the air. Sarah baked it every Saturday. But this time something was different. The silence. I went into the kitchen, barefoot, and saw that the bread was in the oven, but Sarah was not there. There was a note on the table. I went to the pharmacy. Don't worry. But I was worried, because lately she had been disappearing more and more often, and for longer every time. I went back to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. Gray hair, bags under my eyes. The face, I remember, only tired, lonely, and I said to myself out loud, you used to be a man. You had a business. You hired people. And now what? You wait for a first aid kit to be brought for you and told which pills to take. I felt ashamed and bitter. I sat down at the computer. More precisely, at the tablet that Sarah brought. Everything was simplified. There are large icons, a voice assistant. But every time I tried to log into banking, I was thrown to the main page. It was as if someone had cleaned up after me, as if I was a guest in my own life, and I decided to call the bank. And they said, Mr. Jenkins, did you just change your mailing address? You forwarded your paper mail to another address in Florida. I froze. No, I've lived here all my life. I haven't changed anything. We have signed documents. My heart was pounding in my throat. Sarah came only 3 hours later, smiling with coffee. You can't imagine the lines, she said cheerfully, but her eyes avoided mine. I stared at her in silence. And for the first time, I felt really cold. Not with my body, but with the skin of my heart. Sarah, I said, why does the bank think I live in Florida? She flinched a little, but quickly pulled herself together. It was me who accidentally arranged for the delivery of the medicine there, because there was an old address on the internet. Maybe one of my relatives. I don't have any relatives in Florida. And then she was confused for a second. For the first time, the mask slipped off. I started to remember how my shopping had changed. No more bills in the mail, no more physical receipts. Everything is in the cloud somewhere. And she had access to it. She wasn't just making me soup anymore. She was feeding me an illusion. I went to the nearest operator's office without warning. On the move without a cane, staggering, but I was walking. There, I was told. Your number is inactive. It was transferred to another SIM card 3 days ago. I gave up. Who did this? According to the data, an authorized person under a notarized power of attorney. And I remembered the evening when Sarah brought the documents with the words, "Sign here, it's for a tax rebate." I came home late. I sat in the park for a long time, watching the children running around. One boy fell down and cried. His mom ran up and hugged him, and he calmed down. And who will hug me? When you stay with the idea that tomorrow may not come, you start living in yesterday. But you can't bring back the past. And the future may already be signed with someone else's name. Sometimes freedom starts with something small, an old sleeping bag and $12 in your pocket. But these little things are all you have. And if you take a closer look at it, then maybe it's more than enough to start again. Or maybe not. I was up all night. My thoughts were spinning like an old tape on a woman's head, silently, but painfully. Sarah slept peacefully. Her breathing was steady. Mine was not. Around 5 in the morning, I got up, put on an old jacket, the same one I used to chop wood in. I looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't look old, just tired. I took everything I could find from the kitchen drawer, 2 candy bars, a pack of chewing gum, a small flashlight, and miraculously, $10 in cash. An old 20 folded in half and bent 4 times. And most importantly, I pulled out my old army sleeping bag from the pantry. The same one from Vietnam, sturdy. Stained with time. The sun had not yet risen. The street breathed coolness. I walked slowly but surely. I didn't use my phone in my pocket. Sarah had optimized it a long time ago. Now I left it on the nightstand. I left everything. I had the feeling that I had left not a house, but something like a theater set. A beautiful facade empty inside. I walked for almost an hour until I found the old city park, where there were still benches where the homeless slept, and where old Jews used to play chess in the summer. One of them once told me, "Freedom is when you can say no, and no one will take you off the card for it." I lay down in a corner under a tree, hid behind some bushes. I crawled into a sack, and I wrapped myself not only with my body but also with my soul. While I was lying there, I remembered my grandson. He was 9 years old. His name was Billy. The last time I saw him was 3 years ago. I remember holding him in my arms, and he pulled my gray mustache with his finger and asked, "Grandpa, are you real?" Sarah said that his parents were busy and couldn't come. But, as it turned out, she just didn't pass on my letters. Or maybe she didn't write them. Because I didn't know how to use those iPads myself. And here I am lying in the park. And I ask myself, am I real Billy? Around lunchtime, a man approached me. He was tall and unshaven. He smelled a little of vodka and sweat, but his eyes were clear. "Hey, Grandpa, do you mind some company?" I nodded, but he sat down next to me. "I'm Rick. I was a carpenter until my back gave out. And you, Sam, former entrepreneur? And now?" He smiled. "Now we're all just people, no status. And no shame. No one here cares how many employees you had." Rick showed me where they get free coffee at the church, where they serve sandwiches, where you can take a bath if you pay $3, where you don't have to show your ID to get a blanket. He said, "We are at the bottom, Sam. But this is not the worst place. The worst is when you live in a golden cage and don't even know you don't have a key." I listened. And in every word he said, there was more sincerity than in all the conversations I'd had with Sarah over the past year. It was cold in the evening. It was raining. I wrapped myself in a sack and thought about everything, how I let this happen, how lost myself, how I gave control to a stranger, thinking that he was a savior. But the worst thing was that I started thinking that I deserved it. Ava thought that it was my fault. But the next morning I woke up with a strange feeling. Like after a storm, when the tree is still standing, even though the leaves are torn off. Perhaps this sack and these $10 are my freedom. Or at least the beginning of it. Sometimes the truth doesn't come like a bolt from the blue. It seeps in slowly, like water through an old roof. First, it's a drop. Then it becomes a stream. And suddenly, you are standing in the middle of a flood, and your soul is without an umbrella. On the third day after my escape, I was sitting on a park bench. I had already learned to get coffee for free, thanks to Rick. But today he didn't come. And instead, she showed up. A woman about 60 years old. Her hair was in a bun, her coat was old-fashioned but clean. She was holding a newspaper in her hands, but not reading it. "Excuse me," she said to me. "Are you Sam Miller?" I was surprised. "Yes. I was a friend of Judith's. Your wife." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. "Judith died 9 years ago," I said quietly. "I know. I was there for her, and I know a little more than you might think. We sat down under a tree." She introduced herself as Nancy. "Sarah came into your life too quickly, Sam. Too confidently, too quickly. She's not just a caregiver. She's a professional. But not in caregiving." I didn't say anything. Dew on my palms were cold. "Do you remember how quickly she got power of attorney for your accounts? How she began to optimize the property? And how she convinced you to sell the house?" I was devastated. I whispered, "And that's when she picked you up." Those words awakened something in me. One day, one conversation, once upon a time, before last spring, I asked Sarah, "Maybe it's not time to sell the house yet, Lil, and she smiled and answered, "Sam, you deserve peace of mind. Everything will be easier. Don't worry." And I believed her, because I wanted to believe, because I needed someone to care. But now, looking into Nancy's face, I could feel that the truth was somewhere beneath the surface. It was deep, but its bones were already breaking through the soil. Nancy pulled something out of her bag. A small envelope, yellowed with an inscription for Sam. "In case I'm gone." I shook. "Judith left this," she said. "She was afraid you'd be used, that you were too good, too trusting." I tore open the envelope. There was a letter inside. Elena, too, it was written with a trembling hand, but every word was like a punch. "Dear Sam, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. I ask you to take care of your heart. It is tender. Do not let strangers enter your home and your soul without permission, especially those who appear too quickly and with a smile that does not feel anything. You deserve love, not for profit. Always yours, Jay." I don't remember how long I was silent. But I do remember that the sky grew darker and the clouds swirled overhead, as if to confirm that something big and heavy had just fallen on the world. That night I couldn't sit still. I walked around the city like a ghost. My feet walked on their own, under bridges, through alleys, past cars. My heart was pounding in my ears. Sarah had robbed me not only financially, she stole my old age, my peace of mind, my chance to be myself after years of worry. And now I stood there in this dirty coat, with a sleeping bag, as a symbol of my new freedom. But freedom without truth is just another prison. I returned to the park after sunset, and there, in my place, was someone else. A young man. He was holding a tablet. He looked at me, and something in his eyes was familiar. Too familiar. And then I remembered Sarah had once shown me a photo of her nephew. An IT guy, young, with a sharp mind, and cold eyes. There are moments when life doesn't give you a warning. It just confronts you with a fact. And if you're not ready, well, that's your problem. Because the past does not ask for permission when it comes for its own. That evening, when I returned to the park, my seat was occupied. And not just by anyone. It was occupied by the same young man with a tablet, just like the one I had seen in the photo on Sarah's phone, her nephew Jason. I stopped a few steps away from him. He noticed me, looked up, smiled predatory, and nodded. "Sam Miller," he said without surprise. At last. I felt something clench inside. His tone was not the kind of tone you use with an older man with a bad back. He sounded like a hunter who had finally picked up a trail. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying not to show fear. "I'm looking," Jason said, not taking his eyes off the tablet. "For you, man, Because you disappeared, and Sarah's a little panicking. I laughed bitterly. After she's shaken me out of every cent and thrown me out the door. He shrugged. Everyone has their own truth. But, by the way, it wasn't all her idea. It hit me. What do you mean? I whispered. She's just a channel. We came up with the scheme. Me and a couple of other people. Old people are the easiest targets. Loanable. Gully, have no idea how many people like you there are. We call it the warm sunset, because you all think you've retired to peace and quiet. But in reality, you've entered the arena. I stood there like a nail. Not even because I was robbed, but because I was just a piece in someone's game. Not a lover, not a friend, not even an enemy. Just a source of income. What do you want? I finally asked. To finish the story, Jason said, and take what's left. I laughed, dryly, nervously. I have nothing, he nodded. You do. And it's more dangerous than money. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in an old sack under the bridge and remembered holding Judith's hand. How we walked in Central Park, eating ice cream, arguing about stupid things. And how she looked at me as if I were the center of the world. How could I have missed out on real life like that? In the morning, I went to the library. Without documents, without insurance, just like a man who still had a mind. I found a public computer. I started Googling fraud on pensioners. Scam nurses. Withdrawal of assets through a power of attorney. And you know what? There are hundreds of such stories, with names, with photos, with deaths. But what struck me was that in each story there were small details that everyone ignored. And so did I. It turned out that Jason had been posting on dark forums for several years. His name appeared in a case of digital signature forgery, and Sarah is a former nurse who was fired after a patient died under suspicious circumstances. I started writing. Everything I knew, names, dates, events. I sent a letter to an anonymous forum for journalists, and another one to a support group for elderly people who had been victims of scams. When I clicked Signed, my phone, which I had charged in the library, lit up. A message. It was from an unknown number. 3 words. You made a mistake, Sam. Some truths do not fit into the usual framework. You cannot say them in court because there is not enough evidence. You can't say them in confession because they are not a sin, but a pain. But sometimes these truths do break through when there is nothing left to lose. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. I just sat in a cheap cafe around the clock, sipping cold coffee and writing like a man possessed. My story, every detail. What I said, when I believed it, when I closed my eyes, when I felt everything was going to hell. And worst of all, when he lied to himself. It wasn't a diary. It was not a complaint, it was a statement. The voice of a person whom no one heard. I sent it to several editors, to the local police, to a legal clinic for pensioners, to a law firm I read about in a forum. No names, no hope. I just wanted someone to read it. On the 4th day, I received a call. The voice on the phone was young and hoarse. Sam Miller. And my name is Clark, and I work for an organization that protects the elderly from financial fraud. I've read your story, and if it's true, we have a problem. And a chance. I didn't believe him at first, but he spoke like no one had spoken to me in the last 10 years. Not like an old man. He spoke like a man who knew something. We met in an office that smelled of coffee and dust on old files. Clark showed me the documents, files, photos. Sarah wasn't alone. There were others equally smiling, equally friendly nurses. The same handwriting, the same script, and one more thing, Jason. His real name was not Jason. It's Derek Finch. He used to be a salesman, then a night consultant, then a defendant in a digital theft case, unpunished. Are you ready to testify? Clark asked, and here I hung up. Because testifying is not just about telling. It is to open all the scars. To show yourself not as a victim, but as a fool. Not the one who was deceived, but the one who closed his eyes. I left the office. I sat down in the park. And for the first time I thought I got into this myself. I had been warned. My ex-wife, Judith, said, Sam, Don't trust those who smile too much. And me, I wanted trust. I wanted warmth. I wanted not to die in silence. But the next day I came back, I said yes. Clark just nodded. They videotaped me, not like in the movies. No lights, no music. Just a camera, and me in front of it, gray-haired, exhausted, wearing a worn-out jacket. And I was talking. I sounded stupid, like a desperate man. How alive? I told her about how Sarah came into the house, how she filled my refrigerator and gradually my life, how she filled out forms for access to bank accounts, how she said it was for security, how she made me call my friends and say goodbye, because she said I didn't have much longer. I believed her. I was afraid. I was silent. Clark didn't say anything. But 2 days later I got another call from the police, from the TV station, from legal aid. Your story is the first to go to trial, they said, and you will be the main witness. I laughed, bitterly, because instead of the lead role in old age, I got the lead role in a court case. The day before the hearing, I went to the old church, not to pray, just to hide from the noise. And there, on a pew in the silence, I saw her. Judith actually was sitting there with her eyes closed. And when she opened them, she said quietly, "I know everything, Sam, and you know it's not over yet. There are things that shine even in the darkness, but not because they are valuable, but because you have been looking at them all your life with rose-colored glasses on. And when you take them off, you're left with just metal. Cold. Real." A small, stuffy room with dim lighting and the smell of coffee from a vending machine. I was sitting at a wooden table, my hands wet, like in school before a dictation. Behind me were a few journalists, some volunteers, and a lawyer I knew from Clark's organization. The tribunal was in front. Sarah, and next to her was Jason, aka Gersq. They looked as if they had just mixed up the doors, Sarah confident at home. Sarah even winked at me, as if we were playing a silly game and it was about to end. I was the first to be called in. The oath, a dry mouth, and then the words. My name is Sam Miller. I am 75 years old. And I trusted my life to a man who seemed like a savior. I was alone. Not stupid, not blind. I was just very lonely. I talked about everything. About how she had gained my trust, how she had filled out documents that I hadn't read. How she forced me to sell my house and transfer the money to a secure account. How she said, "This is for your safety, Sam. This is the future." And I was afraid not of the money. I was afraid that she would leave, so that I would be left with silence and an old radio again. Sarah's lawyer was young and confident, with perfect hair and a predatory look. He spoke clearly, quickly, and in a businesslike manner. "Mr. Miller, is it true that you have had memory problems? Are you taking medication?" "Yes. But I remember being lied to. Could you have just misunderstood the situation?" "I could have. But bank statements are never wrong. And an empty account is not a hallucination." I held on. I didn't break down. And when I left the witness box, I felt like I was breathing again, like after a storm. Clark took the floor. And he told us about other cases. About 3 other people who had already died, but their names were also in Sarah's files. About schemes that had been going on for years. About how they targeted pensioners, looking for those who had no family left. Sarah sat there without changing her expression. Jason was looking at the floor, and suddenly he laughed. The judge stopped the trial, but the laughter remained in me, in the courtroom, in the silence afterward. After the hearing, I went out into the courtyard. Slowly, with pain in my knees, Judith was standing there. She looked at me as if she knew it wasn't over. "You did it," she said. I nodded. But the joy did not come, because along with the victory came the realization that I would never get back what I had given willingly. My warmth, my trust, my old age. That night I returned to my room in the Veterans Hostel. Lying on the bed, I looked at the ceiling. And suddenly I remembered how Sarah had once put a small statuette on my bedside table. It was plastic, cheap. But she said, "See, it's an angel for you." I smiled then. And now I want to scream. Damn it, it was not an angel. It was a lighthouse in the storm, a false one. and I went to it like a fool. But who doesn't go when they can't see the shore? After the trial, I received a letter. It was handwritten, unsigned. Sam, I'm sorry for breaking your silence, but I was just doing what I was taught. Trust is currency. And you were rich. I read those words 5 times. And I didn't know what was worse, that it was true, or that I wanted to believe it again. People often ask me, Sam, how did it all end? And every time I don't answer. Because there are things that have no answer. There are stories in which the ending is just another morning when you wake up and don't cry. 2 weeks have passed since the trial. The verdict was announced. Drylig Sarah received a suspended sentence and a ban on working with the elderly. Jason got 2 years probation and a fine. That was it. No high-profile articles. No cameras. Just silence. I was sitting on a bench outside the Senior Citizen Support Center, twirling the same note in my hands. Trust is currency. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just empty. I'm like after a heavy thunderstorm when the ground is still wet, but there is no rain. There was only the smell. Judith came up to me. Without further ado, she sat down next to me. She had an apple in her hand, bitten into it. She handed me the other half. I'm not hungry, I mumbled. It's not about hunger, Sam, she replied. It's about the world not stopping. We sat in silence. We listened to the wind. The leaves rustled as if searching for something in the air. And I suddenly became scared. What if this rustling is the answer? And I just don't hear it. I went back to the room and put the kettle on. Instead of tea, it was hot water with lemon. It was cheap, honestly, and delicious in a new way. Then I sat down and opened the old notebook. The pages are yellow with coffee stains. There were notes from the time when I went to the barber shop every day and dreamed of buying a boat. I started writing a new page. Not for a book, not for anyone, just to keep myself going. Today I woke up. And this is already something. And I ate toast. I saw a child laughing. Not mine, but she was laughing sincerely. This is also something. I'm still here. I was waiting for someone to call. To say, Sam, we found your money. Sam, we're sorry for everything. Or Justig, are you okay? But the phone was silent, and so was the world. So I called myself, to the one person who was still there, Dad. The voice sounded surprised. Hi, Mike, I just wanted to hear. Silence. Then a sigh. And I thought you were angry. I was, and then I was tired, and we talked. Not about deep things. About the weather. About the dog. About his mom, whom he still remembers as. She was always right. And I realized that sometimes the greatest victory is not a conversation with the guilty, but a dialogue with the living. In the evening, I sat by the window. Again, and at some point I saw a woman walk by. She looked a bit like Sarah. The same light gait, the same brown hair. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I just watched until she disappeared around the corner, and suddenly I realized I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not afraid to be alone. I'm not afraid of silence. I'm not afraid that the answer will never come, because some things make sense only when they remain unanswered. And here I am, an old man, with a kettle, a notebook, 1 pair of socks, and a heart that still beats. I didn't get my money back. I was not forgiven. I didn't win. But I did not disappear. If you have listened to the end, it means that you too have had your own Sarahs. And maybe you are still waiting for answers. Do not wait. Live your life. And if you have the strength, call someone. No, maybe it's not you who needs an answer, but you who need someone to be a ray of silence that can be endured. Subscribe to the channel. There will be more stories where the truth is not always victory, but it is always a step.